Hey, Brad Kazmarski back. Today I'm going to do a two-part video. Part one is the theory of why I do this, and then part two will be the live training of actually letting you a chance to see it, because people had some questions about wanting to see this as well. Part one we're going to talk about is a pulling progression I use. I use three-step processes for building everything, and pulling progressions are no different. Our main lifts I'll talk about, or I've talked about before, are pretty standard. A lot of people understand that. But then the second bracket of lifting, or third depending on if you use Olympic lifts, is the accessory lift. And one of the main accessory lifts, in general, athletes, bodybuilders, everybody, general training clients, is a pulling pattern. It's a huge filler. Everybody needs to get their pulling in, but that's kind of where it stops. Not everybody knows how to progress that in a three-step process the way we do everything else. So, in the way I use a pulling progression, I will build towards the goal I want. I know that makes sense, but it starts kind of inverse. So in our athlete model, we want to finish in our most functional pattern. We want to be the most functional to go into our sports season. And for pulling progression, that will typically be a one-arm cable row, which I'll show you in the next video series. So a one-arm cable row. We want to finish the last month doing that. So our first progression, our first month in the pulling progression is actually a seated row, which is the least functional. It allows the athlete to get used to that pulling progression, that pulling pattern, I should say, get used to that pulling pattern, but they're doing it in a very non-functional sort of way. They can build some muscle mass, build some stability, and get used to activating the hips and the core and just pulling. They do that in month one to kind of get used to that groove. Then in month two, we go to a one-arm row. You can do that in the three-point stance or the two-point stance position. That's your choice. But that's a little bit more functional. So we've gone from month one, not very functional, learning the pattern. Month two, a bit more functional. Feet are now on the ground. Hand is holding, blocking. So we have a little bit more of a ground-based connection to a rolling pattern. But it's still not completely functional, but it's pretty close. And then month three, that will take us into the one-arm cable row. So that gives us a little bit of hypertrophy in the beginning. Month one is just getting used to the pattern. Month two is getting a little more strength and feet on the ground, which gets us really grooved in a more functional pattern. And then month three, going right into the season, is feet on the ground, rowing pattern. So that's my three-step process, which is my pulling progression. Month one, seated row. Month two, one-arm dumbbell row. Month three, cable row. Whether you use those exact exercises or not, the benefit is that you have a progression to take you through that. If you have someone that's just a general athlete and you want to do the exact opposite, you can do that. So if you have somebody you're training that's just a bodybuilder or a kid who just wants some size or somebody, you can start with a one-arm row in month one. Month two can be a bent over row in month three, or a one-arm dumbbell row in month three can be a seated row. That's still taking them through a progression process where they're learning the function first, they're learning the action second with the feet on the ground, and they're ending with just the traditional hypertrophy training. And if you have a strength athlete whose primary goal is just to get stronger, not necessarily carry it over, but sort of carry it over, you can do either a seated row or one-arm row first. You can do a seated row or cable row second, and end with a one-arm dumbbell row. So as you see, you can use these three different exercises to meet your goal for each phase. And I think that's the key. If you know where you want to end and you understand why you're choosing these, you can mix and match your own and build a progression. So that is how I've done this pulling progression. I hope you give it a try and make sense of it. Until next time.